Okay, we have a never-ending list of versus ideas. And it seems like every week we always get a brand new one to add to it.
This one was on there for a while. You just apparently didn't put it down.
This is one that we came up with a long time ago, but this is one that, like AJ said, sometimes we get like 4 in a row, and I'll remember 3 of them, and that 4th one is the one I forget. This is the one I forgot, but certainly doesn't mean that's going to be a bad versus. This should be a fun one. Mm-hmm. We're going to find out this week what happens when Shock Jocks collide. It is Howard Stern's Private Parts against Talk Radio. AJ, take it away.
His name is Barry Champlain, if that's what you're going to look for.
I know.
I was expecting you to say, it's Howard Stern versus Barry Champlain, but then I was thinking, wait, does he remember Barry Champlain's name?
Yes, I remember Barry Champlain's name.
Okay, remember his real name?
Not off the top of my head. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Well, I was referring to Eric Bogosian, but yeah,
yes.
he has a real name in the movie as well. Yes.
Bogosian is the name I was trying to come up in my head. And
we just talked about him in Wonderland.
Yeah.
But we're going to start with Private Parts. Once again, I just brought it up before, and we're knocking them all out. This was like the 4th movie on that shelf of my parents' VHSs that I was not allowed to watch.
How many's left?
There was this, Fast Times, Rocky Horror, and Dracula. We got all 4 of them.
We've reviewed them all on Versus. Thank you.
Coppola's Dracula. Yes. This is my way of showing I have grown up. I talk to a cell phone about movies for half an hour. Yeah. I'm almost 25 fucking years old.
I don't even want to hear it about age, sir.
Yeah, I kind of somewhat grabbed that from Greg Proops. But anyway.
Somewhat.
Let's keep going. Okay. So, it comes from Betty Thomas, who, of course, is something to you because she was the perfect fit for this movie because she was the director of The Late Shift.
Yes.
And I'll actually bring The Late Shift back in a second. It's really funny because I did something by accident. But
sweet.
Obviously, this is the actual... it's based on Howard Stern's book, and obviously he and most people play themselves. I'm not sure how close it is to his real life. I would assume with everything involved, very closely, but I am not totally sure. You can never tell with that kind of thing. So I do know that he apparently went through 12 scripts that he rejected before landing on this one. So this one must be really great, and it pays off because we have a really great movie on our hands.
Yes, indeed.
And that's the great thing about it is when you think about it definitely, it certainly is considered a biopic.
Oh yeah, for sure.
A very non-traditional one, but nevertheless a biopic. And especially about somebody who's still so relevant now. You would kind of wonder this movie's 97? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was...
February 97.
So, yeah. And he's still just as relevant now as he ever was.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's kind of an interesting obstacle to go into, making a biopic about someone like that. And having it actually feel like a movie, which is what this does. Which is one of the really appealing things about it. It doesn't kind of feel like this episodic thing where he just kind of does things, and it's not like an indulgent thing. You immediately think, a biopic starring the person that it's about. There's nothing indulgent about this at all. If anything, I know it's kind of a bit futile to refer to Howard Stern this way because there's so many different things you could say this about him, but to star and not only have this movie made, but be the star of it and play yourself and relive these life moments was really ballsy. Especially how they're portrayed. Because that's the thing about him is, we learn in the movie, obviously, and you can tell when you hear his interviews, the thing that makes Howard Stern who he is his honesty. And being open, when he was at all the shitty radio stations and he either quit or would get fired or whatever, he finally realized the thing that was going to make him famous was to be as intimate and personal as possible and throw just everything in his personal life out there and drag the personal lives of everybody who's on the show out as well. And that's basically what the movie personifies. Because this is like everything in his personal life, not just him talking on the radio about it now, but being projected on the screen for people to actually watch happen. And it is crazy. Not many people would do that, I imagine. But I love that it's not just him, too, that you have Robin and Fred and Gary and all of them, basically. Allison is in the movie, but obviously she's not Mary McCormick. And it has those really great scenes in between with where it's kind of like Gary's trying to do like a documentary of what's going on in Howard's life and where he is at the time and all that stuff. Like still sometimes when I'm pretty sure it's all scripted, but still even now when I watch those scenes in the movie, I'm thinking, was that actually scripted or was that like, did that really just happen? Were they really escorted away by the cops and did they really have to get pissed off because the woman suddenly didn't want to get naked? I don't know. It certainly looked and felt real, and that's more to its appeal. And I love that there's no, like, younger version and then he's him. He plays himself through the whole thing, obviously with the exception of when he's a little kid. Even when he's in college and had, like, the really nerdy look, it's still him. It's great. And it's interesting to see him in this role because to see him go back to that before he was who he is now, because we know him as the person who doesn't take shit from anybody and, you know, doesn't care what anybody thinks and will just do or say anything that he basically wants to. It doesn't matter if he can, I don't know if you can call getting fined $1 million is getting away with it, but pretty much. And to see him go back and play himself as the person he was before this, that was kind of somewhat the opposite of that. That's what makes those college scenes really interesting. It's also, I guess I should mention this real quick, how good he is. Like, I've heard him say in interviews before that, like, he would totally be in another movie. It's just not something that's really happened. So it's like, you would think it'd be like, you know, Prince and Purple Rain or something, where they have the one movie that they're really good in and they're really, really known for and it becomes super, super popular. And then they do one more movie that fails and then we never see them in another movie again.
He got nominated for a Golden Satellite for this.
Oh yeah, it's worth noting real quick, if you watch the Oscar announcement video, have you heard about this?
No.
When they announced the Best Actor nominees for 1997. Despite the movie's March release, I guess they were counting on something, but it's the official Academy announcement, much like the one we watched on camera. And they announced the 1997 Best Actor nominees, and you hear a very angry person in the very back of the room screaming over and over and over again, "Where the fuck is Howard Stern?" Live TV. It's wonderful.
Yes, it really is.
And those moments, as we build up to him, are really great. But nothing matches when the movie finally gets to the point to where we see him as who he is now. And see how that goes. When we see the great bits like the match game, where they say, you know, the 7 dirty words that you can't say. Peter Jacobson, who was on House, delivers that perfectly, by the way. The list of them really fast. And then there's the speaker sex, and the kielbasa, and the Jenna Jameson scene. All these now classic scenes. But the best portion of the movie to me, the portion that is worth, the whole movie is worth for, that it's just, I just love this. Like, even if I don't always watch the movie from beginning to end. Sometimes I will just watch this entire, it's like the last 45 minutes of the movie or so, when he finally gets to WNBC, and he meets Kenny. The person who played Kenny was not really well known in 1997. Certainly not as much as they are now. But people who have seen this movie, of course, know I'm talking about fucking Paul Giamatti as Pig Vomit. And this performance is brilliant. And I was saying, it's funny, I wasn't thinking about the fact that Betty Thomas also did The Late Shift. Because when I was trying to figure out a way to describe Kenny's voice, the only thing that popped in my head was it's his Shikik and Hick accent. And just, when it reaches this last 45 minutes, where the whole movie is just a battle between Howard and Pig Vomit, just back and forth, is not only comedy gold, but movie gold. That whole segment is just brilliance, and I love it. And it's worth noting, I love the, I don't know how many people catch the scene where, Kenny comes back as the credits are coming to an end. Mm-hmm. After Howard's told him to go fuck himself. Being censored by the jackhammer and all that. It's a hilarious little scene if you catch it. But yeah, that's the great thing, is it touches on all these extremely personal things, but it's also hilarious. It's a movie that so mirrors him as a person. It's a perfect biopic. This is what biopics should be. Because it's not just, him portraying himself and the other people portraying themselves, but just the whole tone of the movie in general matches him. How 1 minute it can be, touching on a really, really touchy personal subject, and the next minute doing something hilarious and vulgar and probably offensive to 95% of people.
Yeah.
I really love the scene where, obviously, his wife has the miscarriage, and then it's a really serious moment, and then, he's joking about it when they're in bed. And then the following scene where he's joking about it on the air, and you want to laugh, but it's way too uncomfortable and inappropriate, and you can't. And he's just trying to make it this really big bit, but then once the music comes on and they're off the air, you kind of see him sitting there in silence, you realize even though he's trying to kind of be that character for the radio, he's still a real person who is still really affected by what happened there. And I like that they threw that in there. So, yes, there's so many great things to say about it, and everybody that's in it is great. You would think maybe they're not, obviously they're experiencing entertainment, but maybe not necessarily acting, and, they're just playing out things that really happened to them, I assume. But still, even as actors, they're all really good. I really love Fred. Especially his little entrance with the bus going, and You Really Got Me Playing in the background. It's all great. So, yes, it's definitely, I guess it's kind of dismissed because, obviously it's the Howard Stern biopic. It was kind of dismissed at the time, and probably still now, as just some raunchy comedy or something. But no, it's a really serious personal thing that just happens to be a really, really funny movie on top of it. And like I said, it's probably one of the best representations of a person a biopic has ever done. So, yes, I can just praise that all day.
Oh, yeah.
Now, our second movie it's a fictional movie based on a play that Bogosian wrote. And he and Oliver Stone worked on the screenplay, but it's inspired by a guy named Alan Berg. And it's also kind of inspired by a book about him. I think there was the book, and then the play was inspired by the book, and then the movie is inspired by the play, is what it is. It kind of this ongoing chain, though. There's inspiration to be had everywhere. But there's really, the fact that he was, on the radio and provoked people and got himself killed because he pissed off the wrong people is pretty much the only thing they had in common, but it was a huge inspiration for the character. And the interesting thing about this movie is how not that interesting it should be. Because obviously it's based on a play, so it's generally going to be in one set for a lot of the movie. I'd say 85 to 90% of this movie is set in the studio. However, they make it this... And, it's just him, going off on people. And you would think it would, But once again, it kind of represents real life. Because viewers of the movie can feel, basically, one way or the other, the same or different from the callers in the movie. They can be really, really, provoked in an angry way by what Barry's saying, or they could be, saying amen, for all we know. And that's why it works so well, given the dialogue that he gives himself. And the reason this movie works, obviously, is Bogosian's performance. Because this movie would not have worked. This practically all one person in a studio dialogue movie could not work if you didn't have an actor giving a genius performance that knows the dialogue really well because he wrote the play, that he can just deliver like he's possessed. I think John C. McGinley even says that in the movie, that he seems possessed when he's going off on people. And this performance is just on fucking fire. And he just really, really lives in that dialogue and just really, really sells it. And another thing that makes it so great is I'm really surprised this is the profession he went into. I think he's also really well known for Law and Order as well. I think it's Criminal Intent. I can't tell the fucking difference.
Never watched an episode of Law and Order in my life.
But it's really interesting that this is a character he played and not what he actually does, because his voice is made for radio. Like, you would think that's really what he does watching this. When I first saw it, I didn't know who he was, except for this. I hadn't seen Under Siege 2 or anything. This was long before Wonderland. But yeah, I believe I just assumed that this is just what he did. It was one of those cases where you just get somebody who does the real thing and get them to play the part because they can do it better than anybody. But no, he's just a really fucking good actor that wrote this really awesome play. Maybe he did have radio life at one point. I don't know, but that's something I am unsure of. But I don't believe so. And another thing that's really well handled here is Oliver Stone's direction. Because once again, you can't necessarily have like a one-person set movie unless somebody behind the camera has a really good grasp on it as well. And as we know, if you can count on anybody to be really, really fucking flashy, Oliver Stone will do that for you. And the way he handles this movie, without overdoing it though, like he knows how small the content is and how we kind of have to be, give it a style, but still make sure we're as, downplayed and not, really, really everywhere. Clearly this movie's not going to have JFK style editing or anything. So, he does, there's so many different, things that he does with this movie. There's a lot of use of reflections to a really effective degree. Obviously we have to get his backstory at one point or another. I don't know if this was the writing or if it was Stone or what was going on or the editor or what, but there is one, instead of, getting, constant, reminders of his backstory through flashback and stuff like that. We're just kind of watching him, we get to know his character as he is now, and then there's one long scene we get that's his whole backstory all at once, and then the movie picks back up where it left off. Which gives it a really nice flow. Because it manages to keep you in, it would be weird and kind of off-putting if you have this, more or less one set story, but you have to get through the backstory and stuff before that. That's nothing against, Private Parts doing it in chronological order, except he's kind of doing it in flashback style because he's telling the story on the plane to the girl, but it feels like I'm talking really fast. If I'm talking too fast, I'm sorry. No, this flashback is put just in the right place to give the movie just the right kind of flow that it needs. So it's kind of like, it's almost like the flashback is the centerpiece, and it's bookended by really giant set pieces set in the studio, kind of. And that was probably the best way to do that if you had to go the backstory route. Which you do because the story, obviously, with his ex-wife, who is Ellen Green from Little Shop of Horrors, which I did not know for a long time. It says more about her performance in Little Shop than it does this, but it's very interesting to me that I did not know that for a long time. I didn't recognize her in this. Going back to Stone, there is another really, really great scene towards the end where Barry's finally going off on his last big thing after he's talked to his wife, Cheryl Ann, on the phone. And he just goes off on the tirade of all tirades that he's ever done in his entire career. And it looks like the camera is panning around him, but in actuality, I have no idea how this was accomplished. There are a number of ways to come to mind, but I really don't know. It's actually, instead of the camera circling around Barry is sitting still, and the background is revolving. And I have no idea how they accomplished that shot, but it really adds to that scene, and is a genius way to go. And I love just how his much more so than we saw in Private Parts, but we still thankfully got it in Private Parts. Seeing behind who he is on the show, like we get obviously Barry's one of those people that doesn't give a shit and doesn't mind lying to people or being offensive. Like there's the scene that I love. This is another stone technique too. While we're at it. When the guy is talking about how he, you know, doesn't appreciate his Jewish heritage or something. So he's telling him this story about how he traveled to a concentration camp and when he was there, and we're just on him, like, right here and up. And he's saying, you know, like, I went to a concentration camp and I walked around and I sensed what happened here. And I saw a Star of David on the ground and I picked it up and I still keep it with me right here in the studio. And in fact, I'm holding it right now in my hands, telling you this story. And skillfully, like right at the moment, just as he says that, the camera has panned down and we see he's just holding his coffee cup in both hands.
Stern does that in Private Parts. Talking about killing kids and should count for more than a half a kill.
But the thing that we see of Barry, especially in his big tirade at the end, is... The interesting thing is his whole thing is he's able to provoke from the studio. Because when he's Barry Champlain and he's on the radio and he's talking to callers and he's tearing into them, he's comes off totally fearless. Because, like, he just does not care at all. Like, the great scenes where he starts receiving packages. Like, he receives a picture of himself with the eyes cut out that says, you know, the only good Jew is a dead Jew and stuff like that. And he gets the box in the mail that says something derogatory, and it's a dead rat, and a giant swastika flag. And it seems like through the whole movie he's just brushing it off, like he just doesn't give a shit about anything. Like he doesn't care if they come after him. Mm-hmm. But then as the movie gets more and more, and he's getting more and more, you know, out of the loop a little bit, we start to realize just how frightened he is of everybody and everything. Like, you know, just the slightest sound, it turns into a thriller in that last portion.
Oh, yeah.
Where he's just, you know, watching everywhere for everything. And it doesn't help that his studio has a big window in it with buildings across the street. Like the moment where he's, for a while there he says, I have no package here, and then the guy just keeps insisting, yeah, I know the box is right there. It's like, can he actually see? Or what's going on? Let's talk about Michael Wincott. Who I love so much. I really wish he was in more movies because he's fantastic. You probably mainly know him as Top Dollar in The Crow. But in this, he is Kent. He voices a couple of the callers, but in person, he's Kent. The 19-year-old drugged out rock star wannabe guy that comes into the studio to hang out with him on the air. And this performance is brilliant, and I love it. It's probably my favorite portion of the movie. Just the way they go back and forth and how we kind of see things from his perspective and how we get a perspective of the youth that Barry Champlain is talking about that is kind of, you know, going off. And there's the moment where the paranoia is like at its peak now when they're escorting Kent out and he goes for something in his pocket and everybody freaks out and it's just a camera. And that's when you kind of really get a sense, because this is before the tirade, that's when you really get a sense of just how scared Barry is of everything that could potentially come for him. Now, another thing that makes the movie so great is how actually still relevant it is now. With the whole, because even back in '88, I think is when it came out, it was basically, the whole setting was the whole idea of you can't say anything without offending people or, you know, thinking people are going to come after you and kill you because of something that you say or some opinion that you have or whatever. And that is so much worse nowadays. Even.
No lie.
Like, it's just at an all-time, depending on what you're coming from, low or high, but it's at an all-time level. You can't fucking say anything anymore.
Nope.
And this movie was really, really into that way of thinking back in 1988. So it's really interesting to watch in that context now. So yes, I mean, it's been, you know, happening since the beginning of time, of course, but The movie certainly has a very interesting way of looking at it that doesn't necessarily beat you over the head either. It's because, like I said, it doesn't really play it up as a, anything that necessarily has a message, even if it is an Oliver Stone movie. When I watch it, I just feel like I'm watching this really, really one-person show, really tight, one-set thriller type thing. And it's really a masterpiece of a movie. And one of my personal favorites. Which means the battle was a little one-sided if you know me and know that talk radio is one of my favorite movies.
Yep.
But, Private Parts certainly holds its own for sure. So yeah, I really hate the idea. Like, I have to pit them against... I have to choose one because the segment's fucking called Versus. But I would be really content of just, saying, this is why this is great, this is why this is great, bye! But,
We started that at the beginning with the categories, but that didn't work too well.
So it's kind of tradition that I have to pick one. So, obviously, the one I would go with, but yes, they're both fantastic in their own right. In their own ways. Which are quite similar, in a lot of cases.
Alright, fair enough. So ends another week of Versus, and so ends another weekend of AJ and Ashley on this channel. Is basically what we've got on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So that means I take back over. So tomorrow, question mark on what you're going to be seeing. Tuesday, NXT and Impact. Wednesday, of course, Blog of Randomness. Thursday, Sip and Snack. Friday, AJ's Movie Reviews returns. Ashley returns on Saturday. Versus returns on Sunday. Next week's Versus, stay tuned, because we don't know.
No idea.
Don't know yet. We'll figure it out as soon as we get to it.
We always do.
Indeed. So that being said, thank you guys and girls up there for watching. AJ, any parting words?